Hello, everyone, and welcome to Achieving Cloud Adjacency, Best Practices for Accelerating Your Hybrid Strategy with Cloud and Co-Location. Today's webinar is sponsored by Evocative and Megaport and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward. I am with Actual Tech Media, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this special event today. Now, I do need to cover some housekeeping items first that you need to know. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. At the end of the presentation, we're going to have a dedicated Q&A session to discuss some of the top questions that you ask. Now, that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. If something goes wrong, if you can't hear or see something, first thing you want to do is a browser refresh. That'll fix most audio, video, slide advancement issues. If that doesn't work, try another refresh. Sometimes it takes a couple of them. If that still doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A and we will provide further technical assistance. Okay, next, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find some super important resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to PDF overviews of Megaport and Evocative, our sponsors today, and a breakdown of Evocative's total cost of ownership. That is some great stuff. It is all free for you and available to download now or anytime during the event today. Now, there's also a link to the ATM Decisions Group, which is a panel of IT decision makers that you can apply to join to participate in some more in-depth events and other opportunities. Now, there you'll also find a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of more upcoming events just like this one. Okay, third, at the end of this webinar event, we're going to be giving away a $250 Amazon gift card to one of you. Now, you do have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of that prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with all the very boring details there. And finally, today, one of the best benefits of this and any Actual Tech Media event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters, as I mentioned earlier. And to help encourage those questions, we have a special additional prize for you today, and that is in the form of another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. So after the event's over, we're going to look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, folks, why don't we get to the main event? It is my pleasure to introduce our presenters today, Jill Templemeyer, Senior Solutions Marketing Manager with Evocative, and Dan File, Global Networking Solutions Architect with Megaport. It looks like they are ready to go, so let's get to it. Dan and Jill, welcome to you both today. It's a pleasure to have you on. Jill, you have the floor right now.
Great. Thanks, Keith. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Jill Templemeyer. I'm a Senior Solutions Marketing Manager at Evocative. We're an enterprise co-location company, and I'm excited to talk to you all about achieving cloud adjacency today with Megaport. So a little bit of what we'll be talking about today, some of the workload challenges that we're seeing commonly across our customers, introducing the concept of cloud adjacency and some of the best practices for choosing the workloads that will go into a cloud adjacent use case and where to locate them. And then we'll dive into Dan's section that covers some Megaport use cases and a demo. So stay tuned for that. So let's get into it. Today's workloads really need a new strategy. So data continues to grow at an exponential rate. So many petabytes of data are stored at enterprises today, and that number is only going up more and more and more. With all of that said, there's been this narrative that companies need to move to the cloud for cost savings along with flexibility and agility. our customers today are finding that customers of the cloud absolutely are seeing that flexibility, that agility, the ability to scale. But there's some very unpredictable costs associated with the cloud, where 42% of organizations have received a bill 10 to 30% higher than expected, which is a pretty huge number. Several companies that have repatriated their workloads have seen a higher work bill than expected. There's several examples publicly of customers that have brought their workloads back to an on-premises environment versus the cloud. But with all of that said, putting all of your workloads 100% on premises doesn't really work the best either. So today's workloads have enormous capacity demands. There's some requirements around power, cooling, and space that are just growing more and more. Staffing, it's never been harder to find qualified staff to manage your data center. There's also compliance requirements in addition to that that are difficult to meet. There's new sustainability requirements that are growing even more costly. There's long lead times associated with constructing new data centers. And that's really compounding with how much more expensive it is to just manage power in a data center, with a $1 million to $2 million cost increase per kilowatt, which is a enormous number. So there's got to be some happy medium between having all of your workloads in the cloud and having all of your workloads on premises in terms of building and maintaining your own data center. So the solution is having a combination of those things, kind of like a hybrid cloud, but being able to bring your IT resources strategically on premises, and as well as maintaining some of those workloads in the cloud, to be able to leverage the benefits of the cloud, the scalability, the next generation applications, but at the same time, be able to have more control, higher performance over some of your workloads, have that cost predictability. And without fully migrating all of your data, you have that data close to the cloud so that you can be able to migrate that data strategically when you need to. This can also be leveraged with multiple clouds, which provides the benefit of redundancy, added redundancy, and avoiding vendor lock-in, which can be a huge deal. So some of the ways that you can optimize your workloads for building your cloud adjacent environment is assessing on a basis of cost, looking at each individual workload and comparing it across the public cloud, bare metal, and co-location. You can see that co-location offers a pretty ideal solution here that doesn't involve the struggles associated with building and maintaining your data center that we went over earlier. And that's when you factor in things like costly egress charges, in terms of being able to reach your customers or your users at the edge. The cloud, you don't have as much control over the location of your data, whereas co-location, you know exactly where your data is. Performance, generally the public cloud involves shared infrastructure, so that is limited, whereas bare metal, you have access to be able to fine tune your hardware, and same with co-location. And in terms of control, typically that you have less governance over your data in the public cloud, again, with the shared infrastructure, and you have total control over your data that resides on your server, that you can access inside of a co-location facility. However, when you factor in the speed to market and being able to achieve quick wins with your applications, the cloud absolutely excels with greater agility. So by looking at each of your individual workloads and evaluating it on these factors, you can get a better sense of, does this workload make sense to keep in the cloud? Does it make sense to bring into on-premises environment? And to go from there, we have very smart people at our company that can help you with far more than just these factors. So if you have questions for us, please contact us, and we can help you evaluate how to optimize your workloads. So when we talk about our co-location facilities, Evocative does offer an ideal solution for cloud adjacency. We have 20 data centers with tier one carriers located in every data center. We're located in key metros across the United States. We are an optimized facility everywhere where you have redundancy, advanced cooling, available power, and high capacity, as well as compliance certifications. And in many cases, we have LEED certified data centers that are committed to sustainability practices, as well as many data centers that have low PUE ratios for additional cost savings for you. I'll show you a quick map of our data center facilities. So we're very strategically located in high dense population areas, and we're continuing to grow and continuing to evolve into more markets. Our partnership with Megaport enables us to deliver these cloud on-ramps to you so that you have your data right next to the cloud when you co-locate inside of our data centers. Dan will talk a little bit more about that, but here are our initial locations that we're coming soon to. And we also have a bare metal product as well that, if you remember the slide that I showed earlier that had the different ways that you could assess your workloads, we can absolutely help you get greater performance and control in a single tenant environment with our new Evocative Metal service. We have 3 different configurations: a small, medium, large. We can also customize our deployments, and you can really have more control and be able to design your environment your way. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan, and he'll talk a little bit more about the Megaport solution with Evocative and how we can help enable those cloud on-ramps for you.
Thanks, Jill. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending upon where you live. I'm going to talk a few minutes about Megaport and how we can enable you from an Evocative data center to the cloud. So just to kind of level set, typically, the customer's data center in the traditional type model is where all the branch offices or your remote offices have to come back to your data center. They get their security treatments and things like that. And then you have to build these individual, tunnels or individual circuits out to the different clouds. Typically, this would be like an AT&T or a Zayo or maybe a CenturyLink Lumen type thing where it takes, 90 days to provision. It's very expensive. You're locked into a term, all those things that the traditional carriers had in the past. Well, Megaport's a little different. Megaport, we have a totally enabled SDN network, right? It's network as a service. You can go in and configure ports in one of our 800 plus data centers that we're in. And you can then make these connections to the different cloud on-ramps, right? We have the traditional big 5, the Google, Azure, Oracle, etc. But we also have a bunch of marketplace providers like 8x8 or any of the different public ports that we put in our marketplace that you can connect to. So now from a single port over a network as a service or a software defined network, you can make those connections from your data center to these different cloud service providers in minutes instead of months. So Megaport makes things pretty simple. We kind of have three types of services. We have access components, right? Those are ports that sit in data centers all across the globe. They sit in evocative data centers and others as well. We have a Megaport Cloud Router, which is a router that sits within our network. It's a virtual router, cloud to cloud type connections, or potentially if you're trying to bring a data center online and maybe you don't have some kind of routing to get to the cloud, Megaport Cloud Router Connect is that cloud router between you and the different cloud service provider. Typically, we see MCR used for cloud-to-cloud routing, and it sits right next to the cloud on-ramps so that latency is single-digit milliseconds instead of a data stream having to come from an AWS back to a data center in Dallas maybe, and then go back to Azure that sits in Ashburn, Virginia. We also have our Megaport Virtual Edge, which is similar to a Megaport Cloud Router, except it's on super steroids. This allows you to ingress SD-WAN type connections to it from your customers, your different branch offices. It is a bring your own license. So if you had like Palo Alto in your network, you could use Panorama to administer this just like it was another site on your network. We then have our connectivity model, and connectivity is just simple. It's our virtual cross connects, right? They can be connected to ports, cloud routers, MVEs, port to port, port to MCR, whatever combination you want to connect these virtual cross connects into the different clouds or off of these different service access components that we have. This here is kind of a use case where you'll see that a customer has a port in an evocative data center. They, from their cage, make a connection over to one of our megaports, and then from there, they can get into the different cloud service providers. Pretty simple. This is typically where customers start when they need to connect their data center to the different cloud service providers, maybe for replication, or production workloads, etc. This solution here is that Megaport Cloud Router that I talked about, where now a customer may have their database in Oracle, but yet their workloads were in AWS. So Megaport Cloud Router is going to sit next to and adjacent to these cloud service providers, in any of our 280 cloud on-ramps, where Oracle can talk to AWS within single-digit milliseconds instead of having to be hairpinned through a data center. You can also have a tail off of the left side of this MCR to come back to the data center so it can participate in the cloud type of transfer, or maybe just sending data from the data center up to the various clouds. So don't think about a cloud router as that you can't put your data center office's office. You can also connect these to these Megaport cloud routers. This is the last one. I said it was MVE. It's similar to a cloud router, but you can see at the top there in the orange that it has an internet drain. What this allows is for you to bring your either mobile users in off their soft client, or potentially your remote offices in on a VPN tunnel, SD-WAN type tunnel, into the Megaport Virtual Edge. And from there, then it starts acting like the MCR that we discussed earlier. You can get to the different clouds. You can route between the clouds. You can make this just a firewall if that's what you wanted. You can make it a full router or an SD-WAN appliance. These can be orchestrated. It's a bring your own license, so it can be orchestrated by your Palo Alto orchestrator. Some customers may have Cisco SD-WAN, but they want to use FortiGate firewall, right? So you might tie together two MVEs, one for a firewall and one for a routing engine. It's really kind of whatever your mind can think of, we can accommodate with one of our services to build a network out. Go to this next slide here. So traditionally, you see a big MPLS network, and the customer will have, I don't know, AT&T to get between all of their different audiences, APAC, EMEA, United States, North America. Well, Megaport does the same thing. Our backbone is a total private network. It doesn't sit on the internet at all. And most of our links between all of our core cities and all of our satellite sites are either 100 gig or 400 gig. Dark fiber, could be waves, etc. That really makes this whole network look like an MPLS-like network. It's all at your fingertips, though, so you can spin it up in minutes. I'm going to do something real quick, and I'm going to jump into a portal, if you'll give me a second and load this up. And I just want to show you how easy it is to create a port and some services within Megaport. This is a test portal, so you'll see some stuff already built in here. But the gist of it is you have our three products that we talked about. We have our access products up here along the top. If I wanted to create a port and I want to put it in the evocative data center, you can see I have all these data centers that I can choose from, right? So if I was in their data center in Seattle, I just click on this. I click next. I tell it I want a 10 gig port or a 100 gig port. I give it a name. This is my Megaport. I'm going to make it a private port, which means that no other customers that are on the Megaport network can see my port. If I want to make it a public port so that I can have other customers connect to me, I can make it public. Typically, we see about 99% of our ports being private. You can put this as in for my migration product. This is an optional field. It doesn't need to be here. And then you get to choose what kind of pricing you want. You can have month-to-month pricing, 12-month, 24-month, 36 months. I'm just going to do month-to-month since it's a demo. I could also have port diversity, and I could lag ports together. I click next. It kind of summarizes what I'm ordering here, and I'm just going to add this port. Now, when I add this port, it puts it over here in my shopping cart. So I could deploy a bunch of ports in my shopping cart, or I can just go here and order it. It validates my order. It gives you kind of our little terms and conditions and our global services agreement, and I can do order now. Now, this is going to take less than a minute, but the nice thing about this is it's going out into our network at this data center and actually finding a live port, right? It's looking for resources. In about 30 to 45 seconds, it's going to give me this button here to download my LOA CFA. So once this finishes here, I can download this LOA CFA. Let's see, hopefully you can see it. I'm not sure if I'm sharing that screen, but it'll give you the tie down information. Let's see here. Can you see my screen, Joe, with the LOA? Or is it still showing the Megaport portal screen? So this is what the LOA looks like. And it's going to tell you that this is in Equinix DC4. It's in Filigree Court. That was for that other port. Hold on a second. Let me go back. My portal. Okay, here's the LOA that I built the port on. This is my one in Seattle at Evocative. And when I download this LOA CFA, I could go back and share it, but it's going to give me the port assignments that I need. From there, you can see I connect to AWS, Google, Oracle. I can really basically build a connection to anywhere I need to do. If I don't see the providers in here, I can go build a connection, and you'll see that I can build it to a cloud. I can build it to another private port that I own. I can create an internet off of that port, so I have internet access. I can connect to the Megaport Internet Exchange. I can connect to one of our hundreds of marketplace vendors, or I can create a service key so that I could give it to another company to connect to me. I'm going to go back to the slide deck here. So really, when you're deploying these global WAN solutions, like I said, you can build ports and MCRs, connect it all together in minutes. I'll throw it back to Jill. We've got some resources for Evocative, and we'll have some resources for Megaport. Jill, are you still with me?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So I've listed on this slide, which you'll get for attending this webinar, some links to some key resources that we have available. There's a blog, if you go to our website, that covers some more use cases with Megaport and Evocative, and how we enable cloud on-ramps, as well as some contact information to get in touch with our sales team. There's also a few handouts in this presentation. So an overview of Evocative, as well as some more detailed information of what I talked about today, including some total cost of ownership comparisons between the public cloud, colocation, and bare metal. And I think there's some Megaport resources as well, if you want to go through those, Dan.
Sure. So in the deck here, I've given you links to our megaport.com homepage. We also have all the locations that we have availability at our locations page here. Just click on it and you can search any of our data centers globally. All of our documentation is online on our public website also, so you can click on this link to get to our docs.megaport.com and look at what ports do, VXCs, MCRs. Any of our documentation is all in one place on our website. There's also a link here for some different resources that white papers and case studies, all those links are here also. So, feel free to use any of these. They're all out on our public website, available for your consumption. Keith, I think that's all we have. Unless there's questions, I'll kind of throw it back to you.
Questions? Well, definitely we have questions. First of all, I want to thank both Jill and Dan for that fantastic presentation. Loved the demo. Dan, I love seeing those kind of in-depth demos, and seeing something being built like that is just fantastic to see. So why don't we move into the questions as we say? And I did want to mention again, as both Jill and Dan have alluded to, make sure you go to the handout section and download those PDFs and take a look at all that stuff. They're free and ready to go. So first question we have is for you, Jill. And the question is, when will the new deployment locations be available?
So we are working very aggressively to get those up ASAP. We're prioritizing right now. There are 6 locations that will be the first ones available. So the slide that I shared in this deck notes our data center locations that we're coming to first. We want to hear from you in terms of which locations you want first. So please contact us, sales@evocative.com, with any requests, and we will accommodate them based on demand.
This is your chance, everyone. Let Evocative know where they should be building these solutions next. So this is a related question then. What if I'm not located in one of the deployment locations? What are the options then?
So I can take that one if you want, Jill. You can have a private line built from your office, right? Maybe it's your private data center, to an Evocative data center or any one of our 800 enabled data centers by an off-net carrier. We don't do any off-net services. So you can get your favorite Zayo, AT&T, whoever to bring a Ethernet circuit in to one of the enabled data centers and then have it cross-connect to a Megaport.
Oh, fantastic.
I also think to add to that, I believe if you're in another Evocative facility that's maybe in the same metro and we're not, we don't have our cloud on-ramp there turned up yet, I believe you can essentially do the same thing, establish that private line over there. And you also would be able to do that for added redundancy. Keep me honest.
You're correct, Jill. You're correct, Jill. So Evocative has a network between all their data centers, whether it's a Megaport enabled data center or not. So if it's not an enabled data center, Evocative could get you from the unenabled data center to an Evocative enabled data center, and then you can jump on the Megaport network.
Great to know. So you're not out of luck if it's not in your city. That is good to hear. Okay, so next one for you, Jill. What is Evocative's SLA? For those of you who may be newer to the industry, that is a service level agreement. What is Evocative's SLA?
Yep. So across the data center industry, 99.99959 or 100% if you round up, is a pretty common SLA. We do promise 100% uptime SLA, in addition to competitive power, environmental facilities, and network performance SLAs that are either comparable to or outperform our competitors. You can contact our sales team. Again, I'll plug their email, sales@evocative.com, to get more information on our SLAs.
And it's worth mentioning, I think, that the two companies, you guys have been working together for years. So this is not like a new partnership or anything. Okay. For you, Dan, attendee wants to know, are my bandwidth speeds set with Megaport?
So that answers yes or no, right? So in our network, you can spin up your services at a gig and move them up or down at any time you want when you subscribe to a month-to-month term. So I'm sitting here on a Friday afternoon. I know I'm going to run a big workload to my other data center. I could go in and spin that up to 10 gig at a moment and then come back in on Monday and turn it back down to a gig. So your services are totally flexible by moving them up and then turning them back down. If you are on a 12-month term, whatever term or whatever bandwidth you subscribe to, you could always go up to, right? And so if you subscribe to a 1 gig, you could take it up to 10 gig, but when you bring it back down, it will only come down to a gig. So you can't bring it down to under 500 meg because that's your committed data rate on a 12-month term.
Okay. So in other words, that is what's known as the consultant's answer, right? It depends. But there are options.
I mean,
that's good. Yeah.
You can move our services up and down. I mean, you can turn them on, turn them off. We have customers that do our month-to-month term and just use it for a weekend and then cancel everything, right? Because maybe they needed to move a workload between data centers. But I mean, our business is enabling customers to the cloud and working with our data center partners like Evocative So we really look for that long-term relationship with our customers and working through their cloud journey to enable them in the different cloud service providers.
Okay, great. I'm getting a little choppy here, I think. One of the problems with live internet. But let me ask you another question, Jill. Is it true that colocation and cloud are not mutually exclusive for businesses and that many companies use both or a combination of one with other IT infrastructure solutions?
Absolutely. So we've actually done a series of surveys that you can find on our website where we've surveyed IT leaders across the industry. Almost none of them have their workloads in either the cloud or in a co-location facility. We obviously have customers that have many workloads in our facilities in multiple locations, but in general, I think we're evolving more towards this cloud adjacent style approach where companies are bringing their data into co-location facilities and connecting to strategic workloads in the cloud. So absolutely, it's a combination of both.
Lots of options, in other words, for how you do this, which is great. Okay, we have a good one here for you, Dan. How do I connect a Megaport port to my IP subnets?
So I'm going to assume that that means IP subnets. Well, I'll talk about both. At the data center, you're going to connect your Megaport to your router or your firewall. So we're a layer 2 service unless you use our Megaport Cloud Router or Megaport Virtual Edge. But if you're just connecting a port into your cage, you're going to connect it to your router. And of course, any layer 3 BGP attributes will be published by that router. On the cloud side, similarly, we're a layer 2 connection through one of our NNIs to the different cloud service provider. And you'll use the cloud service provider's cloud router, like Google Cloud Router or within AWS, where you will advertise your subnets from that cloud service provider back into the Megaport layer 2 network to get back to its end destination.
Okay, good. Thank you for covering both types. Okay, kind of a long one here for you, Jill. The question is, I read that the main difference between cloud and colocation is how data is managed and stored. In cloud, servers are owned by the cloud provider and data is managed virtually. In colocation, servers are not owned by the colocation facility, but instead by the business that is leasing the space. Is that true? And I would follow up, or are there combinations of what is being described here?
That is correct. So typically in a cloud environment, you are leasing your servers from an infrastructure provider versus in a co-location facility where you typically bring your own infrastructure and lease the power and the space in the facility. And in addition to that, you benefit from our built-in compliance, our cooling innovations, and you're able to scale in an optimized facility. So yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. I think we have time for one or two more questions. And this one is for you, Dan. And I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but the question is about AWS and Azure egress charges. It says AWS Azure egress charges are separate and extra to Megaport, correct? I guess they're asking, is there an egress charge to then move your data out of the cloud and then into Megaport? Does that sound like what's being asked here?
Yep, I got you, Keith. So yes, all cloud service providers, well, I shouldn't say all because I don't believe that's the case with Oracle, but they do charge an egress fee. And that's out of the control of Megaport, whether you have an internet connection to the cloud service provider or whether you have a private connection using Megaport. However, what I will say is that when you use an internet connection to the cloud service providers. Typically, those costs are about 9 or 10 cents per gigabyte for egress traffic. When you use a service like Megaport, those costs drop to about 2 or 2.5 cents per gigabyte because you're procuring a private connection on the private side of that cloud service provider. So it's not only about cost, because when you use Megaport, you're also getting a reliable, predictable connection, not over the internet, right? Because we run a private network, like I said earlier. So you got to look at Megaport as a reliable network that connecting to the clouds, and as a benefit, you're also getting lower cost for your egress traffic.
Undoubtedly, and you get a little more reliability than maybe we've had on some of this event today, where I've had some issues with my connectivity, and I think you have too. Okay, I got one more question, and this one is for you, Jill. For remote locations, any solution for remote hands, technical support assigned specialist? Go ahead.
So at all of our evocative facilities, we offer remote hand services. So if you need remote hands, we can accommodate you in any way there, regardless of where you're located. We have several customers that use that. So, yeah.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, Jill and Dan, this has been an absolute delight to have you on today. I want to thank you for educating us on what Evocative and Megaport are doing. It's just fascinating to see how you are raising the bar here and helping companies do so much more than maybe they've been able to do before. So I want to thank you for your time, for your great comments in the Q&A, and for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Have a great weekend. Jill, have a great weekend.
Thank you. Try to stay a little cool, both of you. I am roasting here in Maryland, so hopefully you're not in a place where it's as hot as it is for me. All right. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Well, that was a lot of fun. I learned so much today, and that's why I love doing these as well. I hope you did as well. Now, before we get out of here, though, we have got one more piece of business to take care of, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. As I mentioned earlier, you do have to be present at for the entire event to be eligible to win. And the winner of today's $250 is Matt Gurin from North Carolina. Congratulations to you, Matt. We will be in touch ASAP to get you your card. And with that, folks, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Evocative and Megaport for making this event possible. It's been a blast for me. I hope it has been for you too. And thanks as always for attending, for spending part of your Friday with us, for your great questions. I'm out of here. I'm going to get my weekend started soon, and I hope you can too, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.